Hey guys! All right, we are back for another episode of Interstage Window. I'm Karen Terry, of course, as always, and I'm here today with my friend Landon. Say hi, Landon.
Hi, Landon.
And who else is with us?
Oh, we also have Thumper, who is a great friend of ours who's been writing with us for probably almost 2 years.
I, s-
I
I
want to
was,
Almost
say,
2 years.
yeah, almost
Howdy,
2 years.
everyone.
Hey, Thumper. So, kind of before we get started with anything else, since you've not been on the stream before, how about you give everybody just a little, a quick rundown of like who you are, and if you have places that you want people to find you, you're more than welcome to talk about those too.
So, I'm a random lady in her mid 20s that works in a lab at a biopharmaceutical company, yelling at cells in tanks for hours at a time. I like to write about very weird, strange, annoying people, and I like to throw them at everybody else and make them deal with these terrible bastard children. If you want to find me on Discord, I am Thumper hashtag 7201. I'm very friendly. I promise I don't bite. And if you want to find me on Tumblr, that's dedicated, where there's dead at the first part because I'm funny. Dedicated death.
Oh,
no, fun.
Oh, yes, we're punny. I'm a punny rabbit, because I'm Thumper.
hilarious.
What is it? Dedicated.
Dedicated death. Because
Dedicated.
my PI, my advisor in my grad school program, said that you are so dedicated that you're going to end up dead at one point. You're
Oh,
dedicated. And I'm like,
oh,
Oh,
fantastic.
I
oh.
just, I just love when people of authority give you nicknames that are puns because my boss did a similar thing with land in instead of like Landon, you land in
And
Maine
thus
or
your land in May.
South,
Oh, and
and
it's
that's my
stuck.
land in. And it stuck. So I understand that Thumper, like being like, oh, thank you, dear boss, sir. I guess this is gonna be around forever.
Nah, he actually referred to me by my last name because we had two people in the lab with my first name because it's a very common name in New York. So I just ended up
Oh.
being Vest, which is a weird thing to be just referred to as a random article of clothing because that's my last name. I
Okay,
am
well, there you
literally an
go.
article of clothing. Anyway, we are off topic.
Oh, it happens quite a bit, especially these first 15 minutes. These first 15 minutes, we're allowed to talk about whatever we want, kind of.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it takes a minute for people to get logged in. So for those that don't know that are here early today, I see like about three of you in there. Y'all should talk in the chat so I know who's here today. The first couple minutes is really just us kind of chit chatting before we get to the topic because we know it takes a few minutes for people to get in. Oh, hey, Laura. Hey. Oh, and Lunar. Hey. Oh, I'm so glad you guys are back. Here at work, but still here. Hey, that is valid. Like, it is valid to come watch the stream and just hang out and mute us just to be another viewer. Like, I am for that. I am for that. There is no algorithm on Twitch that's going to cause a problem for us if you do that. So, please, that is still support.
Um, yes, that's what I do during my math classes on Thursday
Love it.
for your new stream. All right, should we get into this topic? Or like
Well,
what we're talking about today, at least?
yeah, let's introduce it. Let's introduce it so people know, and then I guess we can do favorite things.
All right, so today's topic is how to write about what you don't know. We, as authors or writers, have been given the advice over the years to write what you know, that it is the easiest form of writing, and that way you can be sure that you're writing it correctly and in a meaningful way. But once you've gotten to a certain point, you don't want to just write the same thing over and over and over again. You do want to kind of expand outside of your reach. And so we are going to be offering advice on how to write what you don't know. And that goes from everything from like personality traits, like if you can write a character who's smarter than you, to supernatural powers and life experiences. So we're going to dive in deep, and Thumper is going to help us out with that.
Yes. Well,
Camp.
Laura, you already know that I also know everything, and so does Landon. So, I mean, that's why we're perfect to be talking
Yes,
on this topic today. But I
I have
think,
Yeah,
never
they're
been wrong.
educating me.
That's
oh my
exactly what we're
gosh.
doing, Thumper. We're making you superior like we are.
I've been chosen.
Oh my
Probably
god.
elevated.
I don't teach me. Yeah, Lunar, that's exactly what we're here to do today. This is pure sarcasm. For anybody who's watching this for the first time, we're being purely sarcastic. I hope that's
Never.
clear.
Not me. I'm 100% serious all of the time.
Ah!
Yes. So, but before we start talking about that, let's get into our favorite thing.
Yeah, so okay, I'll start.
Oh,
My favorite thing this week, y'all, if you are in my Discord server, you've probably seen me putting a ridiculous amount of hours into Final Fantasy XIV. So, I have been an avid MMO player for years and years and years. I played EverQuest back when it was a thing, like in freaking 1999 when that started. I played that for years. Then I played WoW for years when that came out. I played Final Fantasy 11. I played a smattering of others. Guild Wars is another one that I put a decent amount of time into, and like a whole bunch of others, right? Um, and I played Final Fantasy 14 when the beta was first around, and I really didn't like it. But they've totally redone the game since then, and I had known that. I know that they redid it years ago, but like I just never really got interested in picking it back up. And then I saw like all these people on my Twitter are like apparently I've somehow stumbled into following a bunch of people that play Final Fantasy 14, and so I see them like posting screenshots, and it's still beautiful. Like it's a Final Fantasy game, so it's freaking beautiful. And they're talking about like which NPCs they ship together, and like sharing screenshots of beautiful pictures of their characters. And I was like, dang. So anyway, I started up playing with a free trial that lasted about 4 days before I went and bought the game. And I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed. It's just too pretty. Like that's the thing about Final Fantasy. Like it's just too freaking pretty. So yeah, it's like so aesthetic. It's so aesthetic, and so it sucked me right in. As far as like it, the way it is an MMO though, like it's decent. It's nothing groundbreaking. Like I've not seen anything that's like crazy yet. Now I've only played through the Realm Reborn parts. Like I'm towards the end of that now. For you guys that know how the game works, that's where I'm at in the story. And you level up so fast with the way that they've changed things that I've literally only done the story quest and my class quests, which I've been doing Ranger Bard, by the way. And it's just sucked me in on aesthetic alone. It is just freaking beautiful. It's freaking beautiful. So that's been my favorite thing. The server I'm playing on is Zandalar, I think is how you say it, or Zanda something. That's a WoW word, so that's not right. But it's the one that starts with a Z that's on Crystal, and my character's name is Aaron Eponkin, so Arin Eponkin, Eponcan. If you want to find me on Final Fantasy, that's where you can find me. And that's my favorite thing for this week.
I love it. Anything that takes away the existential dread that we're all feeling currently. So.
A little bit. I mean, it's nice. It's nice to have something to get sucked into, right?
It really is. And sometimes that fantasy world just makes you feel a little bit more at home.
I mean, it's true. Like I've always wanted to be a cat girl, and I can live my cat girl dreams in Final Fantasy. So that's what I'm doing currently, pretty much during all my downtime.
I feel that.
Yeah.
And in full support. So perfect.
Yeah, and
What else are video games for?
Yeah, and she's beautiful. She's like, you can pick like the sun or the moon when it comes to the cat girl. So I picked the moon one. So she's like got dark skin, and then she's her tail and hair color is pink, of course, duh, because I made her. So she's just a beautiful pink goddess.
10 out of 10.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's my favorite thing.
That fits very, very well. I like it.
It does. And Landon, what is your favorite thing this week?
My favorite thing are all of the teachers that I've ever had, except for my junior year writing teacher. She can just not be included in that.
We all have that one teacher.
Are bundled up into my favorite things. And this takes a little bit of explaining, as most of my favorite things do. And that is because I am, going through my first year of teaching right now, and I have discovered that one student that likes to talk to the teacher more than she likes to talk to other students. And I recognize that I was that student. Aww. And it is a miracle that I have survived this long, considering I was probably way more annoying than she has been.
Oh no, it's all coming back to you.
I'm just like, oh God. Oh God, no wonder they were like, go play with other people.
As it turns out, 10-year-olds are not as interesting as they think they are.
They really aren't. Um, and
Oops.
I just know that if I had any worse teachers, I would have been dead a very long time ago because I would have like gotten to the point of annoying my teachers to like just do something terrible.
Oh my
And
God.
so they are all my favorite things. I very much appreciate all of them right now.
I think
That and, the advice and the way that they taught me also, helps me teach and all that. But yeah, mostly the fact that they didn't kill me.
I think we can all say thank you to our past teachers for not killing us. Considering I
Yes.
know how I was during my preteen and teenage years, and and it's a miracle. It's a miracle.
You were perfect. Don't lie.
Ah! That's what we like to tell ourselves, right?
The
Yes.
teacher's pet through and through. I got away with murder.
Ah!
Like, I
See,
literally smacked somebody in the face in a class, and the teacher just said, I didn't see anything.
Ah! I don't think I was like that. I don't think I was teacher's pet like that, but I was definitely annoying because I was actually there to learn shit. And so I would ask a gajillion fucking questions. Like, what
Oh
about this? What
no.
about this? What about this? What about this? And it's like, once I actually started doing some teaching in my career, like I could recognize like how annoying it fucking is and just be like, dude, we're gonna get to that. Would you calm the fuck down? We're gonna get to that. Like, just hang on. Not everybody's like as fast as you are. Chill the fuck out. That was
oh,
me.
but see, yeah, I mean, and I think that trust me, I prefer that kind of student to a student that like just blank stares at me, which I have several of those too.
Well, that's true.
Where I'm
Yeah.
like, I know you can do this, but at least like acknowledge that I exist. Thank you. But no, I definitely was the kind of student that was like, "Will you be my friend?" And it'd be like, "I'm no, I'm your teacher,
And
not
be
your
like,
friend.
I'm
Go
I'm
tell someone
I'm
else about Harry
32,
Potter."
and be like, I'm 32.
The 32-year-old lady.
Oh, yes.
Like, she was just like, "But I want to be your friend." And I was like, I know that feeling. I was you, honey, but like, I gotta write this email, so please just go talk to someone else about your flowers,
Oh my God.
please. So yes, shout out to all my past teachers for not killing me.
We love you. Thank you.
Rude. Thumper, what is your favorite thing of this week?
So, like Karen, I've been playing some video games lately because even though I am terrible at video games, I still persist in trying to shuffle through them. So, the advantage of this is that there are occasionally games where you don't have to be very good at video games to play them and to win at them. One of those being the very popular right now Among Us, which is
Oh,
just Alien the video game, kind of,
All
where
right,
you have.
so I have never heard of this game, so I need a quick, just like, what is this
So,
game?
essentially, it is a 10-player max multiplayer game where you are stuck in a spaceship or laboratory, like just an isolated area where you have an imposter that is secretly like this alien creature that is trying to kill everybody else in the game.
Oh, that's really
Your
fun.
job is to figure out who the imposter is and space them.
mm-hmm. It's really, really fun.
So
And it's
it
free
is.
on your phone. If you can download it on your phone for free and play to your heart's content.
Oh no, this is gonna take. I
Um,
can't have free time to play this stuff.
So, like, when a dead body is discovered, everybody has to figure out who did it. Like, who was suspicious? Who was climbing out of the vents? Did you see somebody running away from the body? And you have to discuss and vote for who's going to get spaced.
I saw a
And you can
TikTok
choose
about this.
wrong. Yes. Um, it's fantastic. I'm very fond of it, even though I actually don't like being the alien. I find it too hard. I love just being the crewmate, just running around doing my tasks, trying to find out, um, trying to. Because if you are the crewmates, like the innocent people, and you complete all of the tasks, you win anyway, even if the aliens are still around, still trying to kill people. So
Yeah, so you're trying
I
to do your
like just
tasks as fast as possible.
as fast as possible and not letting anybody get too close.
Oh
Because if they
no,
start running at you, you're gonna go, ah, you're sus.
this sounds too
And the
good.
debate about who is sus is an extensive one.
Wow. Flash forward to next week when my favorite things is Among Us.
Yeah.
It's really, really fun, and it can suck you in really fast. Like I think the first time I played it, I had to play like 10 rounds or something like that,
Yep.
and it didn't suck me in like crazy, crazy, you know. But whenever you pick it up, it's one of those things like you can't play just one round. It's like a potato chip video game.
Well, it reminds me of like one of my favorite games, which is like One Night Ultimate Werewolf.
Oh,
Have you
it's a
guys
lot
like
like that, yeah.
the video game? But like it reminds me of that, or not video game, it's a board game. But it reminds me of that in that fun kind of like who done it way.
Yeah, it's like that. Like Mafia, Werewolf is
Yeah,
a good example. Like those type of games, it's like that, but it's video gamified.
I love that so much.
There's also some
Um,
great fan art and people who like to have an the evil alien, be very attached to one of the human crewmates and is trying to defend them from the other evil aliens, and it's very cute.
I've
I
seen some
highly
of this
recommend
fan
it.
art. It's awesome. I love it.
Really good.
the
Especially if
TikTok
you
I
have any,
saw,
if you're a monster fucker, it's like peak,
Yeah, there's a
peak
lot of
monster
that.
fucker.
There's a lot of that in the fan art for this. So
oh,
They do
yes.
have tentacles.
yeah, the TikTok I saw was of a man who's like, I'm gonna kill him and then just stand on his body and see if anybody noticed. And I didn't get it, but now I do. That TikTok is hilarious. So
Yep.
shout out
Yep,
to
because you
that
have to
TikTok.
hit the report in order to actually notice a body hiding behind somebody. So if you don't notice the report thing light up when you can't find it, then you can get away with standing in front of the body.
Just standing on the body.
Yep.
Hey Eric,
Hi, Kristen.
we've got Thumper here today, and we're talking about Among Us, a very innocent topic that has not been, done dirty by the internet. We're just doing favorite things. We haven't started the topic yet, so you literally haven't missed anything.
No, I personally think that this is the topic. This is what we should focus on the entire 2 hours.
Oh my god.
This is about how to write as an evil tentacle alien with a pet human.
Oh my god. Let's not. Y'all.
Well, I am, so it's technically on topic.
What? Veto. I veto this. This is not appropriate for my brand.
Well,
My
take it away,
brand.
Karen. So sorry.
Oops. I never should have started a stream where I invited other people. This was a mistake.
Or at least not invited me.
Oops. What were we thinking?
All right.
You
All right.
weren't.
I suppose we can get into the real topic of discussion.
Okay. Okay. So lead us in. How are we starting for today?
Well, let's start at kind of the like overall kind of easiest thing. To me, it would be what sort of characteristics, like personality characteristics. If you are a shy person, how do you write a confident person, someone who puts themselves out there? Like, I think that bare minimum different personality is where we should start.
Okay. Okay. I definitely have some thoughts on that. I think when it comes to writing somebody that's like quite different from you, that either is like way more shy than you or way more extroverted than you, I find it easiest to do that by modeling somebody else. So until you've kind of gotten your writing chops up to write, that different type of personality, what I find really helpful is to think about like, okay, who do I know in my real life that has this type of personality, and what kind of like speech patterns and like movement patterns and thought patterns do they tend to engage in?
Yeah, I think that that's a great idea, basing it off of someone in real life. I also think that
I base off of other characters that for
Oh,
like
yeah.
specific facets. I find that the easiest way to just like, okay, I'm gonna borrow your terrible personness to go be mean over in this thread.
I agree with that. Like, I sit there and I go, I think that a lot with like TV shows and characters that are already
Mhm.
pre-made, you have kind of a list of jokes, and if the TV show has been going on long enough, situations that you know how that particular character would be able to react, so that you can kind of base your reaction off of that. So for me personally, if you're going to be playing another character, I would either base it heavily off of the character or play an OC or a U version of that character.
Oh, yeah. I guess I do kind of do that now that I think about it. I guess the reason why I tend to think about it in terms of like other real people is because I want my characters to be a little bit more realistic. Because when you think about what makes a good character, like there is a little bit of like unrealism in there, right? Because a good character has like maybe 4 or 5 consistent personality traits that they display, and that's just not how people are in real life. Like in real life, people are super inconsistent and don't make any sense a lot of times and stuff like that. So I tend to try to think about real people and like distill them down into something that's a little bit more character like. But maybe it is easier to start from the character first, because then that distillation process has already happened and you don't have to do it. Someone else has already done it for you because you're starting from a character instead of a real person. So I do kind of like that. I think that probably is easier for somebody that's not done a lot of this before.
I think a part of me also like sits there and goes, I think it matters what you want to do with that character. Because if you want to do a plot that has already kind of been written within the character's story arc or similar situations, then you have it that you can take it off of that. But if you
Mm,
want to do something that is outside of that character's repertoire, then maybe going about your way and building a character from having a large personality down might be easier, because that way you have more tools in your toolbox. They're just not as accessible. Whereas with the other way, you kind of have to be making stuff up on the fly.
mm.
So I
Yeah.
really do think it depends on where you're coming from, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense because I think a lot of us that are doing more like fandom role plays, right, that are like taking a character from a TV show or a book or something and going from there, like a lot of times we do repeat certain character arcs we see within the character, but at some point that's going to get boring too, right? Like, and that's the whole reason that we're talking about this topic really, is because eventually writing stuff that you know really well over and over gets super boring. And I think the same thing happens when you do a lot of fandom role play with the same character over and over. Eventually the typical arcs that make sense for that character start to get boring because you've done them 4, 5, 6, 7 times.
Yeah. Thumper, you have any thoughts?
Like, I mean, I think almost every single one of my characters is a patchwork of like 7 other ones, where I
Mm-hmm.
just like, all right, I'm gonna take your infinite forgiveness, and I'm gonna take your little bitchitude, and I'm gonna take your weird cowboy accent, and I'm like just make a patchwork, and eventually it's gonna be a beautiful quilt, and nobody's gonna see all the weird seams and the random things that I've shoved into the filling to make it one whole character. And if I keep mixing it up, it is a weird potluck type of thing, I will eventually have a whole personality that I won't have to continue to add to, because it will be a bizarre enough chili that I can bring to every single potluck and everybody's gonna love it. And I guess in that way they become like a real person in the level of complexity and the backgrounds, but that does take a lot of time. I
Yeah.
try not to take from real people because I don't know people wacky enough to be the kind of people that I'm trying to play. Like, I don't
That's
have
fair.
anybody who's batshit insane as Joy was in my life.
Oh my god.
Oh, Joy. She's a joy.
It was a handful and a half.
She
I
was
like
so
something
good though.
She was. Like something that Eric said, and Eric said, I personally try to think of situations and how I would react versus what I've seen others react. And I think that that is an important step when you are starting out into this. How do you write what you don't know? Is that really what this is it's kind of that step of going from self-insert to not playing self-inserts.
Mm-hmm.
And that first leap is really difficult, that being able to have that separation in your head, being like, okay, how would I react to this, and then how would I see other people react to it, I think kind of helps build a bridge for that leap.
Yeah, for sure. Because we've all had those experiences where we're like interacting with a friend or a loved one or a family member, and the way that they react to things doesn't make sense to us. And I think it can be helpful to think about, okay, what are those times that people did something that really didn't make sense to me, and how can I implement that and kind of make sense of that to make sure that I'm doing something totally different than myself.
Yeah, I think that that is a I think it's an important step, right? Is that you are sitting there and you're constantly checking in with yourself and being like, I'm doing something different than I would, or than what it seems natural
Mm-hmm.
to do.
Yeah.
And I think when you are starting out, when you're trying to figure out personality traits that are different from yours, that is the good way to do it. If you're shy, sitting there and being like, okay, what would I do? Oh, what would I wish I could do if I had that courage in this situation? You can play it that way too, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
What were you saying, Thumper?
Wish fulfillment.
Yeah.
Wish fulfillment, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's
And
some level of wish fulfillment in this for sure. Like it's kind of like a, well, what is it like? What is it like to be somebody that's, completely and totally different personality wise from yourself?
yeah. And I think that also goes into things that are a little bit more difficult too to think about, like funny. If you're not a particularly funny or witty person, it might be difficult to write a funny or witty character because it's unnatural for you to think of the joke to make in this situation or to think of the comeback in this situation, that you really do have to put much more energy into it than necessarily your character would.
I think funny is the hardest thing to mask, like play at being when you are not inherently looking for the joke in every situation. I think that's the hardest one to try and pretend to be because it is a lot more um ephemeral of a thing to mimic versus like intelligence in my opinion.
Mm. Yeah, well, because
I also
a lot of different things are funny, right? Like it really depends on kind of what your taste is. So not only do you have to think about what's actually funny, you have to think about the sense of humor of the people that you're writing with, and are they going to be interested in that, right? So I think when it comes to being funny, not only do you have to think about like what is good comedy in general, but you also have to think a lot about like who you're writing with in a way that you don't when it comes to writing smart characters.
Yeah, I also think, and I like what you kind of said, that there are many different kinds of funny, that you have to. Sorry, my neighbors are making a little bit of a noise. That you have to be able to like separate what is your funny as well. What I find funny, like my humor is, very sarcastic, very much like, oh, I'm great, but that's not everybody's humor. So trying to actually make a different humor from yourself is equally, I think, as difficult. Thumper, that you were saying, like it being the hardest thing. I think then also trying to separate your humor from other humors is difficult as well. Sorry, I went off kind of a tangent
No,
there.
you're
My
good. I
neighbor's
think that's
screaming.
That's on topic.
no. I think you're out. That's absolutely true. Your neighbors sound like they're having a lot of fun, whatever they're doing.
Small children. No, Eric, I am not sarcastic at all. I'm 100% serious all of the time.
Never, ever, ever. And I think also sarcasm kind of makes me think of this when it comes to like what's funny in writing. It's very different than what's funny like when you're chatting with somebody, because timing has a lot to do with it. So you have to think about the timing of the way someone's going to read something, because I'm sure you've seen things where like it's hilarious when you read it because you insert your own timing in there, or vice versa. Like it was hilarious when they said it and you try to retell the story but you don't do the timing quite right, and it's just not funny anymore.
Like trying to read Shakespeare.
Yeah, like trying to like read Shakespeare to yourself, like, is boring, right? It's not funny. But when you see it performed, there's like all kind of jokes in there, and it's freaking hilarious.
Yeah, I think that is also that's important, is context. And also I think when it comes to writing characters, you have a bit of time, right? You
Yep.
have the
Time
time
is
to
the
figure
biggest
out.
asset.
Yeah, you have the time to figure out how to be funny, what the joke is, what is the best thing to say, to kind of work out how the conversation is going to go in your head, because you don't need to have that witty remark a second after something is said.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Whereas in real life, to be funny, you have to be fast, right? Like you have to be
Yes.
fast with it. But when you're role playing, like, you don't. You can take like a couple of days to respond if you're like, you need to make a joke here, but you don't know what the joke is. Like you can take a couple of days to figure out what the joke is, and that's like a huge asset when it comes to playing somebody that's funnier or funny in a different way than you are.
Yeah, and I mean, absolutely. How many of us have sat there and was like, "Oh man, I wish I said something different in that moment."
Oh yeah, like you redo the
Constantly.
And
conversation
you,
in the shower, and you're like, "Oh,
yeah,
this would have been so much funnier. This would have been
it's
so
so
much
good.
cooler."
You have the
There's a
ability to do
French
it.
phrase like l'esprit de escalier or something like that, like the spirit of the staircase, where when you're walking away from an argument, you think of the perfect comeback that you could have
Yes.
said.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Some French phrase.
and luckily when you're writing both in role play and personal like writing, you have that ability to dwell on that and be like, oh, what is the best? So if you have a aha shower moment or a, walking away from the argument moment, you can put that in there.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is something that does help with writing characters that are funnier than you or funny in a different way or smarter than you.
Yep. And
Um,
I tend to have those type of epiphanies, like those type of thoughts as I'm falling asleep. So like something that I do to make sure that I get those down, because obviously I'm not going to go do a reply when I'm like 5 minutes away from going to bed. But like I have my phone with me, right? And we all have a notes app on our phone. So I'll go and like just jot it down real quick. And sometimes the idea is fabulous. Sometimes I wake up the next morning and I'm like, why did I think this was funny? Like it's not. But at least I have it. So I would recommend the same thing. Like if you are somebody that tends to have those ideas like at inconvenient moments, such as when you're falling asleep or when you're driving or something like that, then just note it as soon as you have it, and then you can flesh it out later when you actually go do your reply or go write that part of the story or what have you.
yeah, exactly. And sorry, neighbors finally shut up. So,
You're good.
yeah, no, exactly. You can have that fleshed out. You can be able to rewrite it in multiple ways. It's part of letting you have that time that I think can be very difficult to some RPers, because some people like to read what someone just wrote and then respond right away.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're trying to build up those muscles of writing something different than what you would do and you're not necessarily skilled at being able to do that yet, don't be afraid to take the time.
Yeah.
You can also crowdsource it sometimes. Like, you could just go to an OOC chat, be like, I swear there is a joke here, please help me.
Yeah, like I can't
And
find
then
it.
other funny people might come in and be annoying in the chat for you.
Yeah. Eric has a really good comment here saying that this is kind of a downfall of vocal role play, that you do have to improv very quickly. And I kind of agree with that. That's why I think like a lot of times when we're playing tabletop role plays, like Dungeons and Dragons or Vampire the Masquerade or like games like that, where there is a lot of role play that happens, we tend to be more like first person in our role play. We tend to say, I'm going to do this, right? And we tend to play a character that's like us, but also, I don't know, like a wizard or something, right? And I think that's why for those particular why for tabletop role plays, that's kind of lends itself to the medium. You don't tend to play someone wildly different than you in those games, because you have to think so quickly. But in written role play, on like forums or Discord or things like that, you have that luxury of time so that you really can write somebody totally different than you and still make it believable and still make it fun and still have your partners enjoy it.
Yeah. Oh my God. I didn't even think of that. Like the vocal or in-person RPs, like being able to do all of that at the moment would be really stressful.
Yeah, like I mean, I couldn't play a character like Ludo, right? Vocally. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. It's just too different. Nobody's going to be able to look at me and see that, because I wouldn't be able to portray something that different than me that quickly, right? It's just not. I just can't sell it like that. Whereas in writing, I totally can. I can totally play like a 6 foot, 6 tall man who has an alcohol problem and tends to bully people to try to get what he wants, and some things like that, right? Um, but I couldn't do that.
No way.
I couldn't do that in real life.
See,
So
that's why I'd like to give my characters accents, so that way I can get a little bit more in character. And for some reason, I have decided to give my poor boy the most silly accent that I can possibly muster because it makes me laugh.
okay, but
And there's nothing more important.
I love Alabama version of Saoris. I love Alabama version of Saoris. It cracks me up as somebody that is from Alabama, that grew up in Alabama, right? Like, I love it. He's so wonderful to me. Alabama version of him.
And then Joy was a Cockney for no reason other than it was the most scrappy kind of accent that I could possibly think of.
So when you wrote them, do you write them with the accent in your head?
Yep, every
Okay.
time. that was like the
So-
fastest way for me to like get in character was to put on the accent, like a nice big overcoat, because it immediately put me out of my personal mind.
Yeah.
So it was
I
like
mean, that makes
a neat brain trick, right?
Yep.
and it's like that bridge that you know, I like the way that you said putting on this coat. I'm putting on this character. I'm doing this thing, and it allows you to step outside of yourself and think differently from
Mm-hmm.
what you're at. Um, in order to move the conversation along, because I
Yeah.
think that we are going to get more into depth in all of this, I want to talk very quickly about, we kind of said it while we were talking about being funny, but how do you play a character that's smarter than you?
Research.
Um, okay, so I have a hot take, and I don't think that you can.
Oh, expand
Um,
on that. Tell us why. Why can't you do that? Why does it work for funny to take your time, but it doesn't work for smart to take your time? I guess
I
is really what I'm
think
trying to ask.
because I think that there is a certain level of, I think with funny you can know how a joke is going to play out because you've seen characters either make the joke or someone else makes the joke or you think it's funny or something. You can know how a joke plays out. There are so many possible things that I'm thinking, particularly if you're making a plan. Like a lot of my characters are big planners. And if they're trying to think through a plan or trying to make something smart to come up superior or end up on top, there are so many loopholes that you would have to think about closing, that if you're not capable of thinking about that, your character is certainly not going to be able to think about that. And I have run into the role player so many times that has been like, oh, here's this grand idea, and then not thought of all of these little loopholes and been like, well, he's supposed to be smart, so these loopholes just can't exist.
Mm. So I
And if
Mm,
guess
you're going to
that's
be,
not the right way to respond to that. Yeah.
it's not,
yeah.
absolutely. But I've run into it enough that it's like, no, I don't think you can make a character that is smarter than yourself because you wouldn't even think of these little loopholes to close, right? If you can't even perceive the loopholes to close, your character is not like, their loopholes are still going to be open. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess I feel a little bit differently about it because, and it's really because of this point that Laura is bringing up in the chat, is defining smart. Like I guess I don't really think of intelligence as like this finite thing that people have. I think that intelligence gets perceived as this kind of trait that people have or they don't have, like they're smarter or they're not smart. But I don't think that's the case. I think what's happening a lot is we've got lots of different things going on. Like we've got critical thinking skills, we've got problem solving skills, we've got troubleshooting skills, we've got, navigating social situation skills. And we kind of take all of these very different things and like squish them into this one thing called intelligence. And I think that that really disserves what intelligence actually is. And I think if we thought more about smart characters as a character that is playing to whatever their strength is, like this character is really, really good at navigating social situations. And so whenever a social situation comes up, where they have to kind of get people to do some kind of complex negotiation and try to get them to get along when they otherwise don't want to, and things like that, then they're gonna be good at it, and I have the time to in role play to talk about like what are all these other loopholes that my partner might be able to think of and how can I figure out how to close them, because you can spend the time to do that. I think that's better. Like I think when we craft smart characters, we shouldn't think about like intelligence as some kind of metric. I think we should think about like what exactly are they good at, and a smart character is somebody that really, really excels at the thing that they're good at, right? So like that's how I like to think of it in terms of like when I make a smart character. Like what exactly are they smart about, and why are they so good at their particular pet thing, whatever it is.
Yeah, I guess
Agree.
if it's that definition, then I could totally get behind that. I guess for me, it was if you're willing to do the work as well, then you are as smart as that character. You might not be as quick as that character, but you are as smart as that character. So that kind of also argues this idea that you're not as smart as them. If
Mm-hmm.
you're able to figure it out, you are as smart as they are.
Yeah, I think my take on it is mostly that this idea of smart as a metric is something that a lot of people have. Like I was at a wedding last weekend and I was talking to someone and at one point they just said, "I think you're like way smarter than me." And I was taken aback by that because as much as I have like a graduate degree, I forget to turn the oven off sometimes,
Right?
and I will forget what a word is in the middle of the sentence and use a wrong word, and then I have to go, let me swap that now. I'm going to say this one instead, and now the sentence will make sense. It's like there are so many different measures of intelligence where in certain situations I will come off like a a baboon that has wandered in and has started flinging shit everywhere. And sometimes I'll seem like I actually know what I'm doing. So with the advantage of time, you can look up like what kind of guns would be reasonable to have in this situation? How many could they get? What would be the best way to place them in terms of like how far can they reach? Who do you have at your disposal to do this? With the planning thing, you do have some time, and if you are careful enough, you can see at least most of those loopholes. And while you may not ever be able to do that within like it's like your character is about to,
Yeah,
you
like
can
your
take
character's
a
gonna
couple
go,
days.
like your character's gonna go disarm a bomb in 5 minutes. Like maybe you can't do that, but maybe if given 5 days, then you could have disarmed the bomb, right? Like so that's kind of like how I think about it. And I really think that when a lot of people say that someone else is smarter than them, that what they're really talking about is they haven't had the experiences that other person has had. Because I get that too. I get that at my job. Like, oh, Karen, you're so smart. And it's like, I'm really not. I'm just trained at how to research and how to troubleshoot because I started my career doing, call center work where I fixed people's computers. Like, I'm not.
And you went to Google for a lot of them.
Exactly, exactly.
Mhm.
Hey,
Yep.
Athena. So happy to have a new person here with us. So yeah, like I'm not smarter than your average person, not really. It's just that I happen to be trained in two particular skills that people tend to bucket into quote unquote smart, right? So I'm very good at researching and I'm very good at troubleshooting. And because of those two things, people tend to be like, oh, well, Karen's just so much smarter than me. Like, no, you can also get good at researching and troubleshooting and make people think you're super smart. Like, it's not like that. So that's why I think when it comes to like smart characters, like it really is kind of the same thing as funny characters, at least to me. You just have to get better at researching. Like if you feel like I can't do smart characters, then like we need to figure out like what's going on in your research techniques that's causing you to feel that way. And I think also when it comes to like the other person like pointing out all these loopholes and now you have to solve these loopholes, like well that's like a social skill, right? Like the
I
other
think for me, my definition of like smart was like problem solving, and the way
yeah,
you guys are talking about smart is just good at it at anything. And I'm
yeah,
like, oh yeah, absolutely. Then you can definitely play characters that are better at things than you are.
yeah, for
Yeah, like
sure.
like my dad has a PhD and he is absolutely shite at planning. So, like he's one of the smartest people I know. You can talk to him about almost anything, except if you ask him to put together a simple plan for one day, he is not going to be able to do it.
Yeah, and I think if you do have people in your role play that are kind of like shooting things down and pointing out all the loopholes in your plan, there's like two ways you can handle that, right? Like you can either rise to the challenge and be like, well, I don't know how to fill those loopholes. Can you help me with how to fill them? Right? And if the other person's pointing them out, they should be able to help you with how to fill them. If they can't, like that's a whole other thing. Like that, I'm just kind of nervous about that person's social skills because like you got to
Yeah.
have good social skills for role play. So if you're just there to point out problems and not have ways to solve them, like maybe you need to take a
Don't be an
seat. Yeah,
asshole.
like maybe you need to take a seat, you know?
Well, because
But
like, I think that sometimes with that is that like if your characters are against each other, you hope that there is going to be a loophole in the plan or the thinking or anything like that that the character has. Therefore, your character, who is hypothetically just as smart, can can then go off of that.
mhm.
I mean, that's happened within our
Oh
RPs,
yeah, absolutely.
where hell, that's happened to me, where I'm like, "Oh, Rab is so smart," and then I'll be like, "Oh, I left that wide open," and here comes Thumper going in with it. Perfect, we'll roll.
And what we hope for, right, is that those types of things get handled in out of character conversations. Like because at least the way that we role play, like it's not a competition, right? Like it's not like that. So we hope that those things get handled in out of character conversations. Of course they don't always, and that's where like I think it's fine to tell somebody that like, hey, I wish you would have talked to me about that instead of just having your character go do this thing that totally undermined my character that I just happened to not think about, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it takes that social skill. You know, if you're going to play a smart character or you're going to play against a smart character, it's not just about winning and trying to look the smartest. And I think if you're going at it from that way, then yeah, you are going to run into a lot of problems because then you're going to create a
If you got
competition.
it from that, if you got it that from that angle, you're just like basically the anime white glasses character, where you're
Yes.
just like the random
Oh
asshole
my
that
God.
flies in and just points out everything that's wrong and laughs at the other characters as you drift away, and eventually you're gonna get socked in the face.
Right, because other people are just going to see that and be like, this is somebody that's on a pedestal and I love knocking down pedestals, you know? So
Smash, smash.
I think when it comes to this sort of thing also, like, you can build up to it slowly. Like, you don't have to kind of make the immediate, you know, I'm going to make the smartest character in the room, right? Like, you don't have to do that. You can be like, okay, I happen to know a lot about this topic, so I'm going to make a character that's really good at this and sort of practice, right? And you can kind of build it from there. And the great thing is that the older you get, the more experience you get, and therefore the easier it becomes to play those smart characters. So something that was hard for you when you were a teenager, if you keep practicing and keep practicing, eventually it's not going to be so hard. So
Absolutely.
so I think that it's one of those things that, like, if you're intimidated by it, if you're nervous by your character looking stupid, which is a totally valid thing to be nervous about, because that happens and there are people out there in the role play world that really do just want to knock you down and win and stuff like that. So, you know, just I think if you are feeling that way, then the answer is like build up slowly.
Very true.
Yeah.
All right. I think that because especially this next chunk we want to spend a decent amount of time on, so we should probably move on.
Yes. Yes. Okay, lead us
Um,
in to this is the main part. This is what we really wanted to talk about today. Next, y'all.
so part of all of this, right, is you were talking about the fact that people have lived different life experiences than you, and that is what has made them better or worse at certain aspects.
Hmm.
How do you play characters with different life experiences that you do not have? And so I have like three main ones, and we'll go into the first one, which is trauma.
Hmm.
Um, which also trigger warning or content warning for a lot of people. We're going to be talking about some heavy stuff, so figured that we should get that ahead of on record.
Probably a good
Um,
idea.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm
we
just
are.
gonna put one in the chat just in case anybody pops in after this point.
Thank you
Sounds
very
good.
much. That's a good idea.
So, how do you talk about things like sexual assault, domestic abuse, child abuse, PTSD, if you do not have that in your past, in your history? How do you write characters who have that while also making it not glorified, but also making it believable?
Yeah, so I've got a couple of points on that. One thing, I think if you want to write about some kind of trauma or things like that that you've not experienced, it's first worth making sure that like you inside yourself are okay with like why you might want to do that. And I say that as kind of like a little bit of self discovery that I think you need to do before diving into it, not as something of like, well, if you haven't experienced it, you're not allowed to write it, because that's bullshit. Okay, so I'm going to make that really clear right now,
Absolutely.
what I think about that. I do not agree that that you have to only write your own experiences. Like that's not okay, right? Like you can write experiences that you've not had, and it doesn't make you a bad person. So that I'm not trying to discourage anybody. However, I do think if you go into it knowing why, then you can kind of tease apart some of the mistakes that you might make. Um, because if you look inside yourself and try to figure out why you want to do it, and it turns out that the reason really is because you're trying to romanticize something that doesn't really connect with you, well, then maybe that's why your portrayal is going to come off that way. And I'm not saying that's necessarily bad. Like, it's okay to be self indulgent. We're role playing, right? The whole thing is self indulgent. Like, the whole thing is self indulgent,
Yeah.
right? So it's not like a knock on you doing that. But I think if you go in knowing why, then if you get those criticisms, if you get that feedback, you can be like, yep, that is what I'm doing. You know, and it's so much easier to handle that instead of getting defensive. So that's kind of the first point that I want to make writing those types of experiences if you have not experienced them.
I think that that's a really, really good point, is that also on top of that, like, I liked what you said, that if you're not feeling it and it's not, if you're not connecting to it, then it might be because you haven't done enough research on it or you neither explored it enough.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to notice that if this is a different life experience, you're not going to be good at it the first time going through, right? You writing this, you're not going to be awesome and you're not going to totally understand the nuance of writing someone else's trauma or writing a trauma that you don't experience, you haven't experienced. You're not going to be good at it off of the bat. And so I think also, like, lowering your expectations will also let that depth of the, like, it will let the pressure off of your shoulders so that you can believe your character more. And if you believe your character more, other people are going to believe your character more.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is an important also aspect to this.
Yeah, and I think one
Um,
flip side of that I want to mention is if
yeah,
you are reading someone else's writing, and it's not connecting with you, and you feel, hurt by that or offended by that, one thing to note also is that these experiences are not universal. They're not a
yeah,
monolith. So please do not take from this that it's okay to automatically assume someone doesn't know what XYZ trauma is like, right? People are
Absolutely.
not required to disclose what they have been through. So you are not entitled to go to them and say, you don't get what it's like to be a survivor of this, that, and the other. Maybe they do. You don't know. So just disclaimer on that as well.
absolutely.
Like, trauma has
Um,
so many weird presentations in life. Like, you
Yes.
can you can do almost anything, and there will be some example out there that will probably be authentic to what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And, like, there's also no wrong or right way to write it, as long as you are being respectful, you're doing your research, which I think is the number one thing and things that we are going to continue to repeat for the rest of the episode. And you don't make it their only personality trait.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That's my
Mm-hmm.
big one.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I can tell, for me, I know that, like, what has happened to me and what is my trauma is not the only and most important thing about me. And if you write it that way, that being like, oh, this woman, this character used to be in a relationship with a man who beat her. And that is the only thing that seems to be present in her personality. You are not writing an authentic character. I'm not saying you're not writing an authentic, like, response to that, but there needs to be something deeper. Someone is not just something that happened to them.
Yep.
They're more
It's
than
like they didn't just pop into existence in in an abusive relationship. There was a
that.
Yeah.
person before that.
Yep.
And and also, like, how they got out of that relationship is important. Did the person die? Did they run away? Were their kids involved? Like, there's so much other aspects of that scenario that is also deeply important to that person and that character that you can expand upon and can bring into their personality too.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
So I think that that is something that is extremely, extremely important to remember when we're talking about trauma and other things. But especially trauma, is that you are not just, your character is not just their trauma.
Yep. And I think when you are kind of first starting out, even if you have had that trauma before, there is a, because a role play, a lot of what we're doing, right, is very self-indulgent. There is an urge to, like, just really write about that trauma, and that's really it, and not do anything else. And I think when it comes to role play in particular, as opposed to other types of writing, because for role play to happen, you have to have a partner that you're writing with. When you do those sorts of things, it's really difficult for the other person to engage with your character. And I think that's where a lot of role players that are writing about these topics, that haven't really thought about it very deeply, or maybe haven't experienced them, kind of screw up, is they don't think about, like, what is this going to look like to the potential person I'm trying to write with? Why am I trying to role play this as opposed to just going and writing a fanfic that I don't have to engage someone else with? So when you're role playing, you really do have to think a lot more about what else is this character about than just their trauma? Because if it's just the trauma, I think you're going to really struggle to find role play partners that are interested in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think it's important to recognize that there is going to be a change. A response to trauma is that something happens, something changes. There are certain traumas that's not necessarily true, but for the most part, there is a before, during, and after. And I think that I've seen several players who do not take that into consideration, who sometimes write their character was the same before the trauma and was the same after. And I personally don't think that's not how trauma really happens.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know we just talked about that there is no right or wrong way to be trauma, but there is a before and there is an after. Not saying you have to write the before and the after, but you do need to be aware that this is a huge life event that does affect a person and need to take that into how that person was affected into consideration.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Um, and I think when it comes to this sort of stuff, I just think we have to be careful about where we are assigning certain things. Like something else that I want to make sure is clear is that when it comes to writing these really heavy topics, like I still think that my advice is true in general about roleplay here, where it's really just about you and your partner, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's worth spending time thinking about, is this going to offend trauma victims in general? Because it's not for them. It's for you and your partner. So I think when you're researching and trying to figure out like what exactly it is that you want to write, I think it's helpful to think about it from what's going to be good for you and what's going to be good for your partner and what's going to be good for attracting partners, as opposed to like trying to make sure it's exactly respectful for all survivors. And the reason why I say this in particular when it comes to trauma is a lot of times that response to trauma, like that after effect of trauma, it's messy. It's
Oh,
messy, and a lot of people don't want to acknowledge that. They don't want to see that. They don't want to engage with that. Whether they're a victim of that trauma or not, they just don't want to think about, like, sometimes the results of trauma are that you have like uncontrollable bouts of anger. Sometimes the response to trauma is that you want to go inflict trauma on other people. Like sometimes it's not good. Sometimes the outcome is not good, and I think that because people have quite an aversion to that, it's just important to not think so much about the wider audience when it comes to role play. Just really think about what you and the type of partner that you want to attract are interested in, as opposed to being scared of offending everybody, because I don't think you get anywhere if you are super focused on that, because then you end up with a portrayal that's like not true to what you originally wanted to do.
absolutely.
I love the mess myself.
I mean,
Same.
I do too. Like that's what I'm here for, right? Like I'm here for the indulgence, the messiness. Like I think that's the fun part. But there's a lot of people that don't like, and so I want to make sure that that is acknowledged, and because all of us that have written, these problematic things, that have written these traumatic things, like we've all encountered it, I'm sure, at one point or another, where somebody was just like, you're doing it wrong and this hurts my feelings because I've been through, da 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 event that your character went through, and you're doing it wrong because this, that, and the other. And a lot of times those criticisms are valid, and sometimes they're coming from a place of, you're showing me an aspect of this that's messy, and that's why I don't like it. And so I think it's just important to acknowledge that is the case.
I agree.
Found the
Yeah.
mess to be very cathartic to write for myself, because one cannot
Yes.
always be messy if one wants to survive in one's situation. So the chance to be messy in writing can be some form of catharsis.
Bingo.
Absolutely. There is absolutely nothing wrong. And like Thumper said earlier, trauma comes out in a mass amount of ways. For me, I personally would do the research and see what fits best for your character and what is the most fun to write for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because that having those connections are sometimes better than sitting there and being like, well, my character is just going to do this thing because trauma. If you
Mm-hmm.
sit there and you connect those dots and you connect all of the behaviors, you can develop a really, really incredibly well-rounded character. which takes work. And that's part of what we're talking about is it's work to get to this point. It's work to write this. And what Karen said is true as well, is that this is for you and your partner. But at least for me, I like to write really well-rounded characters. So I'm always going to encourage other people who are listening to me to do that as well.
Yep. I mean, I do, of course, too. Like, I want my characters to be real, right? I want them to be real in a way that feels real to me and that feels real to my partner, because that's the kind of partner that I'm trying to attract, right? So I'm going to spend the time doing that research and consuming that information. And I think what you said about taking the time is really important, because when I propose, like, because I've done a couple of videos on these types of topics, right? And I say in all of those videos, like, you got to do your research. And something that I don't think that I emphasize enough in those videos is that, like, when I say research, I don't mean spend an afternoon. I mean, sometimes I mean spending weeks or months, you know?
Yeah.
Like, sometimes it's a lot of work before you're really ready to dive into this particular character that you wanted to.
Fall down the YouTube hole.
So,
It's a lot of fun.
yeah, like, sometimes I'm really talking about, like, weeks and weeks and weeks of preparation before you start this character, like, for real. And I don't think that I emphasize that enough in the video, so I'm emphasizing it here. Sometimes when I say research, like, I really, really mean, like, deep dive into it, getting lots and lots of different opinions, reading lots and lots of things, watching lots and lots of, like, firsthand accounts on YouTube, stuff like that, that can take a long time.
Like, you can also take the character that you just wrote and develop them further, right? If you finish a story arc with a character and you sit there and you go, you know what, I didn't particularly like how they handled trauma, or you just want to recycle that character or something like that, you can have them handle the same-ish trauma in a different way and see if you like that way more.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can also use that as research, is the try, fail, try again sort of
Mm-hmm.
method as well. Is a one that I hugely suggest, because that made a lot of sense. Hugely suggest. Anyway, one that I suggest, because that one can be a lot of fun too, and that way you can also flesh out what your character is and where they are, and also see how that changes. If a character experiences a different kind of trauma, did they react a different kind of way? Like,
Yep.
you can start exploring that as well if you do that.
Yeah, and at the end of the, I mean, it's just words on a page, right? It's just words on a
Oh
page.
yeah,
So if you don't like it, just redo it.
absolutely. And if you did like it, then redo it again if you want to. And then maybe a different partner will cause a different reaction. Like, that's also part of it too.
Yep.
Is I find writing to be a part of my research when understanding certain, responses to certain things, is like, oh, okay, I understand that more fully because I've played this character before, if that makes more sense.
I do the same thing.
Yeah, I'm not alone. All right, so to kind of move into the next section of this, um, or not. So we're going off from trauma. We're going to go to mental illness and physical disabilities, which
Yeah.
I think has a lot in common with our advice. Is going to be at least very similar to, like, what we just were saying about trauma, but I think it deserves its own, like, conversation.
Yeah, and Thumper, I know this is one in particular, like when we were talking about what we wanted to make sure we touched on, that some of this stuff was a lot of what you listed. So maybe if you want to start us off on this topic, what are your thoughts on when it comes to, like, mental illness and disabilities and things of that nature?
I think, again, it goes a lot into research, but with mental illness in particular, you can find a lot of your research will tend to come across people talking about something that they don't actually have.
Hmm.
And this will especially come into play with things like borderline personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder. Any of the cluster B type mental illnesses are going to be highly stigmatized, and there will be a lot of stories and a lot of things where people were hurt by people with these things, but they aren't, like, those personality disorders do not make you a bad person necessarily. And I think to play a character with one of those, there has to be I guess a sympathy in a way, like an empathy for the fact that there's a person who has that disorder who is still a person that deserves, like, some form of understanding and respect versus just they're a bad character because they are a psychopath.
So is kind of what you're saying is because for mental disorders there's a lot of stigma that it can sometimes be hard to find firsthand accounts. What you're really finding is secondhand accounts of the person that was like harmed by
Yeah,
someone who had
like
these
you know,
disorders.
like narcissistic mother-in-law type stories and things like that. Like you got to find the first-hand stuff, and that can take some digging to find, especially because people will throw cancel culture at them pretty quickly.
Mm,
It's like, oh my God, you're a narcissist. And it's like, well, yeah, I'm working on it. I'm still a human being. As it, nope, nope, you're a narcissist. You're egotistical. You're an abuser. And it can devolve a little bit. So
mm-hmm.
that would be my big recommendation would be to look for the firsthand accounts. And if you have friends who have these mental disorders, I think that that will definitely inform your writing if you had long-term interactions with somebody who has that. You'll see the little things because people will talk about the big things about um mental illnesses like splitting or things like that. And there's little things that will pop up too that will make your portrayal more authentic and will make it a more immersive experience for yourself to write that type of character and will be a more enjoyable experience for whoever you're writing with.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely fair, and that's something that I guess I hadn't really thought about, but it's like so true that a lot of times when you're talking about those cluster B, disorders in particular, it is really hard to find firsthand accounts. Like I feel like it really kind of wasn't until recently when social media kind of made it so that anyone who wanted to could build a platform, that you even could find firsthand accounts. Because I think about like my own research journey in things that I've looked into and things that I've wanted to write about or I've wanted to explore, and you're right, like it really was not until recently that firsthand accounts even came across my research attempts.
Yeah, I'm like trying to sit there and be like, have I ever seen anything in all of my research that be like for the first-hand account of a narcissist? Or is it mostly just the people who have been, for lack of a better word, victimized by narcissists?
I think it's
And I'm
mostly
like,
it. It's
I
mostly
would
those
give the
people that have been
example of
harmed,
Travis.
right?
huh?
Sorry.
It's a lot of it is the people who've been harmed. I would actually point to
Yeah.
Travis McElroy of the McElroy brothers. He is a narcissist, but he is also somebody who can be incredibly compassionate and funny and enjoyable and like a well-rounded great person who also happens to have narcissism.
Narcissism.
And
Mm.
I think that that might be a good place to start for like a first-hand account of an easy way for somebody to kind of adjust to that sort of um perspective where it's like you already kind of know this monster factor from the adventure zone or whatever else, so it's not like you have as many of the preconceptions knocking
Yeah.
around your head.
Mm.
Well, and that kind of goes into what I had been saying about trauma, but I also want to repeat for
Yeah,
this is that a character is not their diagnosis. And I think
correct.
Thumper, you said a lot of like making sure that this person is beyond just the psychopath, beyond just the narcissist. If you're going
Mm-hmm.
to use those mental illnesses to play this character, that
Give them a
that is
hobby.
not their only trait. Sure, it plays into certain parts of their personality and their traits, but it is not the defining thing about them.
You know, another really good portrayal that I can think of is Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. You don't find this out until a couple of seasons in, but the main character in that has borderline personality disorder, and it's very obvious, like once they reveal that was the intention from the start for her to always have that, based on like how she behaves in the beginning.
Yeah.
And it does manage to show both the harm that her illness does to her and those around her, while also making sure that she's still a human and she's still respected as well. Now it's a comedy, right? So it's got some other things in it it's always trying to be funny, right? So if that's not your bag, if funny things in regard to personality disorders is not your bag, like FYI, it is a comedy. But I really like it. I think it really portrays that particular condition as something that that's very real and affects her, and she has a lot of struggles that she goes through because of it. But never once in the show did I feel like that they were trying to make her some kind of villain, or trying to make her unlikable, or trying to make her not be seen as a person, which was great. That's one of the very few portrayals that comes to my mind that's like that.
It's a great resource.
Yeah.
I'm yeah. It's the stigma of mental illness is so so still set upon us that it makes me angry that almost every single villain is portrayed to have one.
Mm-hmm.
When just as many good guys have them. If you do not think Tony Stark did not have PTSD, I will fight you. Um,
He obviously did, right? And it obviously affected him. And there's certain decisions that he makes in the MCU that are not so great, that are because of his PTSD. I think that's very true.
but it's not talked about as much, right? And I know
Yeah.
PTSD is different than mental illness, but they kind of, if there's a Venn diagram, then PTSD is kind of the center. Um, and I just I wish it was better. I wish it was better portrayed. And I know as our peers, it is not our job or responsibility to necessarily have to do that, right? Like Karen says, you are writing for the audience of one and for your own pleasure. And that you not wanting to write a diverse character when it comes to mental illness, or write a different form of mental illness or anything like that, you don't have that responsibility, and that stigma is not put upon you because you don't want to do that. But I do want to, like, if you are considering writing a character with a mental illness, I urge you not to play the stereotype. I urge you to do your research and not just play what you have found in media, but do those firsthand accounts. Try to be a little deeper, and then try to understand that this is still a human being. Have that empathy that Thumper was talking about. Even if it's a character and a fictional human being, you kind of still have to love your characters, I think, to write them correctly.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think that's the case. And I think that, I'll take a little bit of a selfish note with it, like I often do, because I think this helps people understand, like, it's not we're not saying like you should do these things because you have a moral obligation to do them. You don't. Um,
The
saying that
duty
you
to the
should,
character.
yeah, like I think that you're gonna have a better experience. Like, you are gonna have more fun role playing. Like, if you do these things. Like, I know it's extra work, and I know it's extra time putting into something that for a lot of us is just like a time to turn your brain off a little bit. But I think when you are somebody that takes your hobbies very seriously, like obviously I do, and I assume my audience does as well, because you're here to learn more about role playing, so obviously you take this hobby seriously. I think it's important to do these things, and it's going to help you have more fun in the long run to do these things.
Yes.
And then we've been talking about mental disorders a little bit more, but I want to take it back to the physical disabilities as well. But I
Yes.
think my advice is really the same. It's find firsthand accounts, and for this one in particular, because this isn't as stigmatized as mental illness is, there are a ton of YouTube channels, vloggers about literally anything and everything. Like, there are
Yes.
popular vloggers that are hard of hearing. There are popular vloggers that are blind. There are popular vloggers that use, wheelchairs and other, aids for walking, and whatever, like
Or service
anything, whatever it
animals.
is.
Yeah.
There's so many. Literally, just put in whatever it is into the YouTube search, and you will find like 6, 7 vloggers about that particular topic, and just consume and consume and consume and get those firsthand accounts.
Yeah, because those firsthand accounts, I mean, you don't have to base your character off of those people, but those firsthand accounts will give you some depth on how to do something that you can't even, like, and we're going to get into this, and we'll talk about privilege a little bit too, but like, you as a person who doesn't have any disabilities are privileged in that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to worry about being blind and not being able to drive because of it, or being deaf, and all of the struggles that come with that. So if you get that firsthand account, especially for physical disabilities, you at least get some insight into the privilege that you don't even know that you have.
Yep.
And then
Yep.
that's definitely not a bad thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like, even if you don't end up using all the information, having it in the back of your mind is going to make your portrayal better. And it's going to make you feel more confident about your portrayal too. So you're going to get like just all kinds of benefits from putting in that time.
Yep. And then also you might learn something. Like
Yeah.
that's the other thing too, is that even if you don't end up playing a blind character, a deaf character, a character who has depression or some other mental illness, you might learn a little bit about it, and now you're aware that it exists in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that is never a bad thing in my head. That's also part of like why I love to RP, is I get to discover other humans even though they're not real humans.
But
But
it
like
is
they're based off of something.
it's a great tool for empathy though. Like, even though they're
Yeah.
characters and they're not people, like even though they're characters and in some ways that means they're fundamentally different from people, there's also a lot of similarities with people. So I do think that it does help build empathy, because if you can connect with a character that has, this, that, or the other thing, then when you encounter it in the real world in a real person, then you have a little bit of a frame of reference so that you are able to engage more empathetically. Lunar, I think, has a question I'm going to read out. How do y'all feel about your characters dying? How do you handle that? I had a partner who nearly left the site because their character was going to die. While my favorite character died, I thought it was fun to bring together everyone and was brought back to life. Oh, so they were brought back in the end. So I don't think that character death is really quite on topic for today, but I love it. Like, I even have on my to-do list to eventually make a
Composition.
spare room episode about like how to kill off your characters and what makes it fun.
Oh my God,
So
can you talk
I
about
love
that
it.
on screen, please?
Yeah, we can definitely do like a stream about endings. I think we could do a stream about endings that includes like like the ultimate ending of character death.
Um, just very quickly, Lunar, it is sometimes a competition in my head on who can make the best death for a character. So that's how I feel about that.
I think that's actually like an acting exercise like if you have a troupe of actors, you have to like try and act out the most dramatic best death,
Yeah,
and it's a pretty good competition to literally have people do.
it
Yes.
is my favorite reaction out of all of the reactions to get in the chat is when a death is coming and nobody else but your partner does, and your mod, thanks Karen, and then it happens and everyone just explodes and it makes me so happy. Anyway, yes, we want to stay on top of discussion, but yes, that should be a stream because I will just gush about that. That'll be great.
You're
Yeah.
very good at character death.
And Eric and Lunar, I see you guys, and I know
Perfect.
you're always in the chat. So yeah, we will definitely consider that one of you guys for a third person. We'll talk about that and see what we can do to get y'all on talking about character death, because I think it's a really fun topic. I love doing it. Obviously. Okay, we can move on now. Thank you.
Um, yeah. So just very quickly to like wrap up mental disorder and mental illness and physical disabilities. Uh, don't make it your character's only personality trait. That's
Yeah.
all I ask. Oh, I have a note here, and I don't know why I put it, so I'm just going to ask it to us. Is there any mental illness or physical disabilities that shouldn't be written? Do we feel?
Thumper, why don't you go ahead and answer? Because my answer is very straightforward. So Thumper, why don't you answer first, and then I'll go.
There are some where it would be incredibly difficult to effectively do that. Like, let me just pull out a random one, which was a particular interest of mine in my genetic days. Tay-Sachs syndrome.
Oh, what is that?
That is a disorder where there is an enzyme that's broken that won't allow uh, bodies in the brain to be broken down. And so essentially, what you have is a child that will probably die before they are 10 years old, and they will be profoundly disabled for their entire lives. It is a very harrowing, horrible disease. Luckily, we have significant genetic screenings now to prevent this disease from being inflicted on anybody, and it is one where if you want to try and play a child character that has this, you will have a very difficult time trying to do that.
Mm.
Could you? Maybe.
I feel like they would
Should
be
you? maybe not. Because
I feel like
it is not really possible to get a firsthand experience from this because they are children.
yeah, I feel like they would be better as an NPC, like
Hmm.
having a character that's having to deal with being a caregiver for that child might be something interesting. But yeah, that would be really hard. Oh my God, I've never heard of
Yes,
this.
I had to. Yeah, I had to pull out like one of the most dramatic possible examples.
I
But like,
appreciated it. Thank you.
um, I think that would be one that would be very difficult to do. Or in terms of anything else, I think as long as you could find people on the internet talking about their own experiences and you can get a handle on how to do that properly, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's why I kind of wanted you to go first because my answer is basically like, no. There is nothing under the sun that I think is bad to write about. I think that when we're talking about fiction, when we're talking about art, I am not in favor of taking anything off the table, and mostly because historically, I think that every time that people have tried to take certain topics off the table, like it just doesn't work. Like it's impossible. You can't stop people from fictionalizing anything and everything that they want to. Um, Eric has a good point too about certain situations. So he has a condition called functional neurologic disorder, which I know Eric you've told me about a little bit, and you talked a little bit about on a previous stream. It would be incredibly difficult for someone to effectively RP someone with that because it's different for each person. And I think things that are like super different for each person, like I think autism is another good example of this. Like autism is completely different in different autistic people, but that doesn't make those people more or less autistic, right? And so stuff like that, where it's really like more of a syndrome that manifests itself in tons and tons of different ways, is harder. Um, so I think like that's more of a challenge, but if you're up for that challenge and you're willing to put in the research to do it, like I still say like try it, go for it. You know, the worst thing that can happen is that you struggle to role play as it because you're not doing a good enough job and you need to get better. You know what I mean? Like and to me that's like such low stakes. Like why not?
I personally think knowing that I am not queen of the world and I also don't get to say what is right and wrong for everybody, I don't like the magical cure,
Mhm.
right? I don't like that suddenly
Is that's
you
a
have
different
you're
thing, I
playing
think. Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
playing a character with mental illness or even a physical disability and they find love and then they're cured.
Hate
Uh,
that so
I
much. I
personally
hate
don't
it.
think
Oh,
that
I hate
that
that too.
should be played. If
I
you are going
agree.
to write if you're going to write a character with a mental illness or physical disability, then you need to know that those do not go away unless there is treatment, and even then, usually don't go away.
You know what, Landon? A magical penis cured my anxiety. And you're
It just
erasing
hit that
my
anxiety button right
experience.
next to the cervix.
Exactly. And you're erasing my experience right now. And
Okay.
I just want to like tell you that you are
It wasn't a
canceled.
penis, it was a dildo, and this isn't the 20s. Oh
You know
wait, it
what?
is. I'm so confused now.
Oh my God.
Hysteria was real, guys.
Ah! Oh my God. So for y'all that don't get the joke, look up hysteria and the way that they used to treat hysteria. It's not like really a condition or anything. It just means a woman was being annoying, and so she had to go
It
use a
was,
vibrator for a minute.
by the way, it was a considered a mental illness back in the day.
Was
So,
was.
but yeah, that is me. I sit there and I go, that should not be played. But that's also me going, that is who I wouldn't want to find or play against in a partner, and if that is your thing and that is what you want to do, and that is totally up to you, and you can do that.
Yeah, I mean, like
I
if you have some kind of mental illness or personality disorder, and you wish it was possible for a penis to cure it, and you want to go write that, like you have fun. But I agree with Landon on that one. I'm not personally interested. But again, that goes
um
back to like you need to interrogate why you want to write this, right? So that you know what you're potentially in for.
yes. So we should move on because the next topic is a big one.
Okay.
And this is social and cultural differences.
Okay.
Big
So
tough
we
ones.
yeah. So we had a stream. I said I would look up the episode. I didn't look up the episode because I'm terrible.
You know what?
Uh,
Neither did I.
In there
So
somewhere.
oh, you know what? I think it was number 11. So it was a
okay.
few. Um, and we talked about pretty people, but most importantly, representation in RP and specifically RP groups, and how. And we never really got to talk about how do you write someone who is of a different race or has a different culture than you do. Um, and I mean, we can even make this about like sexuality or anything like that. Gender. How do you write that?
Hmm. So I think that one of the things that we've said a bunch, so I don't want to dwell on it, but just again, research. Like research and looking at firsthand accounts is going to have a lot to do with it. And just like when I talked about the physical disabilities, how you can type it into YouTube and find like a gajillion vlogs about whatever topic it is, that's going to be the case with most, not all, right? Different cultures. And when I say cultures, I mean that in a very broad term. So I mean like racial differences, I mean sexuality differences, gender differences, location differences, like all of that stuff. So I'm just going to use culture here as a blanket term for all of that because I do think all of those things have their own cultures.
Absolutely.
So yeah, research. That's my number one, my first thing. But I don't want to spend too much time on that because we've talked about it so much.
For social and cultural differences especially, you can find books written by people of the people that they represent, and you can find fantastic ways to describe and delineate all of the different small little details that you want to flesh out your character with these other books, and these other characters that will, because they are in a book and not just somebody talking about their personal experiences, it's gonna have a lot more descriptions and be a lot more, I think, maybe what you're looking for. And also just reading more. It's good for you.
Some people struggle with reading.
I listen to audiobooks.
Yeah,
So
same. Like
I
I do a lot of audiobooks and things like that because reading takes me freaking forever.
yes.
But yeah.
Yep.
You still
So
get the same
I do
benefits.
audiobooks, but like, consuming media from
YouTubers.
other
Yeah,
places, very good.
Hmm.
absolutely. I also think that ugh, sorry, it's such a heavy topic.
You're good.
I think
It's
that
hard.
also, yeah. You just need to also be open for constructive criticism. Um, I understand that, like, yes, again, this isn't, you aren't writing for an audience, but um, if you write something culturally that is not, done or that, is a stereotype or something like that, being able to be open about someone who is from that culture. And I'm not saying like people who are not antis, I'm talking like someone who is a person of color from the culture that you are trying to write, to sit there and be like, this is a little offensive. I think being able to hear that and sit there and go, okay, I should probably do a little bit more research. You have to be open for that feedback, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're not, if your attitude is going to be like, I'm not going to listen to any haters, then you're probably going to really struggle to write a character that's got a different culture than what you come from. Now, I'm not saying you have to listen to every hater, right? Like I'll just
No,
use an
absolutely not.
example. I'll use an example that like this legit happens. Like I see because you don't know the person that you're criticizing when you criticize them online, you don't know what culture they're from. I have seen, for example, black authors and black role players and creators get taken to task for doing blackness wrong, which is just
Oh,
absurd.
dear Lord.
But this is the internet, so that happens, right?
Yes.
So I think that when you go into this, like you have to think about, like, what am I going to do when someone tries to have that conversation with me? And I think you have to really think about that and really decide because no matter how much research you do when it comes to these types of cultural differences, someone's going to try to take you to task for it, right?
Yeah.
It is inevitable. It's just a matter of time, right? Like if it hasn't happened to you, don't worry, your turn's coming. So I think that you just really have to put not only thought into the character and the research itself, but how am I going to handle it if somebody comes to me and says this portrayal is incorrect, or this portrayal hurt me, or this portrayal is harmful, or whatever it is. Like, how are you going to handle that? Because you're going to get it from all angles. You're going to get it from your friends, hopefully, if you have a diverse group of friends, hopefully you do, right? You're going to get it from strangers. You're going to get it from, well-meaning people. You're going to get it from aunties. You're going to get it from all sides, because this is how the internet is. And if you're putting your writing out there, it's going to eventually happen. So I think you just have to really put some thought into how you want to handle that.
I also think you have to keep in mind when you are writing, if you are writing the character, I'm gonna use sexuality for a second. If you are writing a gay character and you want to have a scene where that gay character is either mugged or abused or something happens to that person that is traumatic, and you want to play that out, you have to be prepared that there are going to be people on the internet whose real life is that, who have experienced that, and that could be that idea can be triggering for them. And I'm not saying that you have to edit your writing to fill that or to fix that, but just know that that is a possibility, and that you have to be respectful of that, or respectful at least if someone doesn't want to write that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like don't try to make your role play partner do those things with you if they don't want to.
Yeah, respect their triggers or their warnings or their squeaks or whatever. Squicks, not squeaks.
Close enough. We knew what you meant.
Squeaks can be a good thing. Squicks. Yeah, exactly. I think that is something that when you are going to write about real life issues when it comes to race, gender, sexuality, you have to realize that that is someone's reality.
Yep.
Especially if it is super violent or racist or anything like that, characters or situations sitting there and being like, no, there is someone who has experienced what you are writing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say, like, don't write those things. Like, those things happen in real life, so, like, obviously they can be written about, I still don't agree that there's value in taking anything off the table when it comes to fictional approaches and when it comes to writing. But just know that, like, it might upset some people, and you have to be okay with that. And if you're not okay with that, then we kind of have to go back to, okay, so, like, why are you writing this? If you're not okay with potentially hurting someone's feelings over this stuff, then why is it important to you to write it? Because I do think when it comes to those topics, like, you have to be okay with it. Like, you have to be okay with understanding that no cultural group is a monolith, and you're going to get potentially people that don't see your portrayal as valid. And maybe that's because you didn't do enough research and it's legit not valid, right? But maybe you're talking about something very niche that they just don't know about, and so you just have to know how you want to navigate those conversations, and when you want to navigate them versus when you don't. Because I do think that there is, because sometimes you're going to get criticism from people that's not super valid, right? Like aunties, which I want to do a whole episode talking about aunties. But for like those situations, you got to think about, like, okay, well, when I have somebody like that, what am I going to do? Like, am I going to actually try to engage them? Am I going to just block them? What am I going to do when it's like a friend of mine that I really value their opinion coming to me and saying these things? Like, it's just stuff you have to consider.
Yeah. Thumper, you have been very quiet. Did you want to say something?
I mean, I thought that was a pretty good rundown, and I think that anything that I add on to that would just be redundant.
That is totally fair.
Oh, Lunar has asked, what is an anti?
Oh, okay.
Anti.
Who wants to take that? Who wants to take that definition?
I think you two have way more experience with antis, so you can go ahead and tackle that one.
Yeah, that's a Karen thing.
Okay, so what an anti is this was something on Tumblr that started out where people would be like anti in a particular ship, like in fiction, you know, like whatever kind of ship, like they weren't into it, right? So they would have a blog that would be like anti such and such, and they would blog about how awful this particular ship was, and it kind of grew from that into like this group of people now that's basically moral police on people that write online, on people that write fan fiction, on people that role play, on people that draw fan art, and they tell you that you're a bad person for writing or drawing this particular thing that they don't like. Like that's literally what it is. It's awful. And so like when people talk about how bad cancel culture is and stuff like that, a lot of times they're not really talking about cancel culture. They're really talking about how mean aunties are on the internet. So that's what that is.
Unless they're, comedians on Netflix with 4 different specials talking about how they're silenced.
Oh my god. Well, that's like a totally different thing. Like you can't cancel a famous person. It's just you can't cancel someone who has $1 billion. It's not possible. But that's like a whole other. That's like I want to do an episode where we talk about some of that stuff because it does affect role players and it's complicated.
The anti-brush will occasionally be painted over people who may have legitimate grievances, like, hey, I'm getting this image of a child being abused upon my dash. Could you tag that at least? And they go, oh, the antis are trying to silence me and my creepy stuff. It's like, don't care for that one.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that it's probably better to tag things, but I also think like a lot of people on the internet, like they demand that stuff when they could really just unfollow. Like you don't have to follow that person, you know? And Tumblr's tagging system is so jank. And like that's where a lot of the problems on that website comes from is because they don't give you the proper tools to block the things that you want to block. But that's like, I mean, that's a whole other topic.
You need browser add-ons to block stuff.
Which is so stupid. It's so stupid. Like Tumblr should have that natively. Like what in the hell?
Broken site.
It is.
I hate to break up this anti party.
We are off topic.
We are. Yeah.
Are we getting into supernatural stuff now?
Well, no. Well, not quite yet. Hang on. I want to do like one other like. So when it comes to cultural differences, like I think we shared a lot of good tips. And Thumper, I know you said you were good and you didn't have anything specific to add, but I still want to hear like your particular experiences. Like, how do you go about it when you want to write somebody that's like a different culture that you have not experienced?
So, the main thing that I want to draw on is unlike with some other examples where I would try to draw from other characters, with something as far-reaching as social and cultural things, I always try to draw from people that I know in real life. So, when I was portraying a Black woman in Atlantis, I drew from my friends Kayla and Kiana and a couple others, Black women that I knew in my life who had very different experiences, very different backgrounds, but just to try and create a picture of a whole person that while they didn't represent the entirety of being a Black woman, it was some form of authentic. When it comes to something more specific, like a southern character like I'm also playing right now, I have a best friend who's from Georgia who speaks exactly like he does. And yes, I know Georgia is not Alabama, but Bama was far more amusing for me to go from, to make like this very soft.
It's all the South. It's
fine. Like very like it was like, what is the worst state that I could make a complete hick gay boy from?
Wow,
Bama.
I am offended.
You are not.
No, I'm not.
But
I'm just kidding. Sayars is awesome. I could never be offended by him.
Precious baby. He's
It's
so
true.
stupid. I finally got to make him an asshole in this roleplay. It was fun.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But yep, so drawing from a lot of the little things that I've picked up from knowing my southern friend over the years, in terms of like low country boil, I'd never heard of that.
It's
and
delicious.
then like, okay, yeah, it sounds pretty all right, but like I am a 100% Yankee. Like I was born in Michigan, live in New York, never lived below the Mason-Dixon line. Like, I am Yank. So I have to look to research and things like that to inform my premise, both of just like, what is it like to be from the South, but also to live in the South, which is a very different experience from just being from there and transplanted from a location to somewhere else. It's a culture that is informed by the surroundings, both geographically in terms of like what are you surrounded by? Are you surrounded by marshes, or are you surrounded by like um very rocky areas? Like those will kind of inform what your character did at their start, what they were like, what their memories of home will be like. But also just like the people. Who are they hanging out with down there? Are they mudding? Are they dashing around the back roads with natty daddies and getting absolutely shwasted? Or are they like in a metropolitan city drinking tea with like authors and poets and things like that? Like it's not a homogenous area. You can't just paint the whole of the South like these are a bunch of people who think the same way and live the same way and they're all like this. It's like, no.
Yeah.
Like, Eugene Yang, he is Texan and he's Asian. Like, yeah.
I've
So,
been in New England for too long because I thought you could do that with the South.
Oh my God. Everyone thinks that. Like, everybody thinks in the South it's like a whole bunch of conservative rednecks who like to go muddin', which, like, I mean, there are a lot of conservative rednecks that like to go muddin', but you know what? Liberals and leftists like to go muddin' too. Like, y'all forget. Y'all forget that there's a ton of liberals and a ton of leftists in the South too. Like people
it's
think
like,
that
do you
there's
think that all the black people who live in the South are conservative rednecks?
right, like
Is that your
no.
thought?
Like I mean there are definitely conservative black people, but there are
Yes.
plenty of progressive black people too. And I think that that's just a common misconception from my own life that I know of a culture that people get wrong a lot. Like they think it's a whole bunch of conservatives down here, and it's like it's so not. There's really not. There are definitely conservatives, but the thing of the South that makes people think that there's all conservatives is that the conservatives have all the power, right? But that doesn't mean that the South is all conservatives. So just like a little moment there for the South.
Doesn't.
Your
that people
Southern
tend
pride is
that people
showing.
that people tend to get wrong. Like they just tend to get it wrong. Like it's just like because they're going off of stereotypes, right? Instead of actually taking in firsthand account of people that live in the South.
Okay, but I think that that's a really important takeaway, right? Don't play the stereotype. If
Mm-hmm.
you want to, that's fine. No one's going to stop you, and it's not considered wrong. But I think that if you really want to understand a character and make a full rounded character, go beyond the stereotype.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the stereotypes are true because that's what makes them stereotypes. But
Like, I like to pick and choose like little parts of the stereotype to sprinkle in there to be like, so yes, there are these little things that may have happened, but there's also all of this.
there's also so much, and
Mix
there's
it.
also it's so much more than just that. Like stereotypes are one dimensional. Go into 3D if you can, or at least 2D. Dig in a little deeper, see what you can do, and that goes for everything, right? That don't play
Yep.
the stereotype is my biggest form. Do your research. Don't play the stereotype. Don't make it their only personality trait. That is
Yep.
what I got for
Yep.
you. Given a time, we should probably move to supernatural creatures.
Okay, so we'll do a few minutes on
Yeah.
that. A few minutes on that. So one of the big things that I wanted to say about this is when it comes to portraying something that's not like you because it doesn't exist in the world, is to be careful that you're not like emulating something in the real world accidentally. Like I see
Don't make
this.
space Jewish people. Don't make space Jewish people. People do
Yeah.
it all the time. Don't
Exactly.
make space Jews.
Exactly. Like and people will like take like a supernatural trope and be like, "Oh, it's a corollary to this thing in real life." And then they do it all sloppy and then it's like really lame.
Okay, can I get an example? Because I think I am not quite sure what you mean by that.
Okay, so the main example that comes to mind, I know this, I don't like to talk about her, and I know I made a rule that we're not going to talk about her, but I'm going to break my rule
Sorry.
because it's a really, really good example. Okay,
Good.
so in Harry Potter,
Yeah.
J.K. Rowling likes to pretend that her werewolves are some kind of like AIDS corollary.
Got you. Yes.
And
Yep.
they're not. Like, they're not. She wrote regular ass werewolves and then added that on after and tried to pretend she was progressive. And it's really freaking obvious that's what she did, now knowing as much as we know about her. But, like, even if you go into it thinking that's what you're trying to do, which is not what she did, but say you did. Say that you go into it thinking, like, I'm going to make my werewolves an AIDS corollary. Well, you better really fucking know your history about AIDS, because otherwise what's going to happen is you're just going to make gay people into monsters.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's
Drug
my thing
users
on
into
that.
monsters too.
Yes, that's another good one.
Yeah, like wasn't David Thewlis told to play Lupin like a gay junkie?
Yes. Yes.
Wait, what?
That's what
From
that's
the
what he is.
director.
Yes.
But then she made I am so.
Are we
Very
having
much
fun?
issue.
Are we having a good time talking about this? I would also like to draw the orcs are often portrayed as being very much like black coated, especially
Oh
given
yeah.
the hairstyles, and it's like, oh, so the gigantic, brutish, aggressive, unintelligent, different speaking group of people with othered skin tones.
Oh, it's so annoying.
Interesting.
Well, it is kind of like
Bright.
and then
Bright.
doing,
It was
like,
awful.
and then goblins as coded for
Goblins.
Jewish and
Yes.
everything like that. Okay.
Yes.
I understand where you're
Some
at.
examples.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it
So yeah,
annoys me.
don't paint these IRL groups of people who are living actual real human lives as being non-human.
Yes, I find
It's
it
not great.
really frustrating when I see it. It's not good because as soon as I see that, it takes me out of the story, because it's like, oh, so literally everything you're saying about this race of people, you really mean Jewish people. So now I know how you feel about Jewish people, and now that's what I'm thinking about instead of paying attention to your story. So
Instead of
like,
paying attention to the lore of what this is supposed to be.
exactly. Like, if you have this whole other fantastical world, or world that's like super far in the future, like, we didn't get to this place of having the stereotypes that we have because these are natural occurrences. We got here through things that happened in the past. So if your world has a different past than the real world, you're not going to have the same allegories and stereotypes. And so when I see them, I know that you didn't really do proper world building, and it becomes very obvious to me that you didn't do proper world building and you skipped this particular step. And now that's what I'm thinking about. And now I'm potentially also offended at whatever your idea is of this group of people. So I hate that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's stupid. Let's
Yeah.
stop doing that.
Yeah,
I have decreed a law. It will not happen anymore.
oh my god, just stop allegorizing. Just stop allegorizing things as supernatural. If you want to write about black people, just write about black people. Stop thinking like, I'm going to write about black people, but they're orcs. Like, just anyway.
Yeah, okay, here's the thing. I like the metaphor. It just needs to stop being about people and groups of people.
Yeah.
Keep your metaphor, but make it clever and stop trying to do it as like a group of people.
Yeah.
That's all. Thank
Yeah,
you.
like you could do like a story about I don't know, the Armenian genocide, but as long as you don't make one of the groups of people non-human and entirely one-dimensional assholes, you could do it.
Yeah.
Sure.
But just don't do the allegory where you've characterized one as like I don't know, boars.
Yeah, or whatever. Yeah, I agree. And again, just like everything I said before, like, I know a lot of roleplay is indulgent, so like, you don't have to listen to me. Like, if you want to write this, that's fine. You're gonna offend me, and you're gonna have to live with that. And I'm not gonna come for you, obviously. Like, I'm not gonna come for you and be like, you're doing this thing that really annoys me and really offends me. Just know now you know it does. So if you want to write it, you just have to live with that, and that's fine. Like, I don't think that's a problem.
Yeah, you're not
Doing yourself a
long as-
disservice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're not writing for anyone else but you. So like, cool. If this is what you want to do, who cares if it pisses Karen, Thumper, and Landon off? You don't care. And if you do care, then don't do it. That's all I'm gonna say.
Exactly. Like, you have to decide that. You have to decide that. I can't decide that for you.
I also think that when it comes to supernatural, there is no wrong way other than what we just talked about. There's no wrong way to do it, right? Supernatural, I mean, okay, I'm going to use this as an example. Twilight, no one liked the vampires in Twilight. However, her lore is her lore, and she got to make the vampires however they wanted to be. And it was not right or incorrect. People got angry because they didn't like it, because it wasn't traditional vampirism. But it still was her life and her world, and she could build it and she could do it as she pleased, and so can you.
Yeah.
Anger and frustration at her werewolves, though, that was valid.
Nope. I mean, the allegory of the werewolves, yes, but the actual lore of the werewolves, you can't get angry at it. It is what it is. That is her lore. She gets to invent it. So do you.
Well, I think when it comes to like published works like that, like if you want to like get angry about it and talk about that, like go for it. I wouldn't spend
You
my
put
time
it
doing
out
that.
to the world as a whole.
Exactly. I wouldn't spend my time doing that because I feel like I have better things to do. But if that's what you want to do, then that's what you want to do. But when it comes to role play though, if you are joining somebody's Twilight role play group and they have changed some of the lore because that's what they want to do in their role play group, I don't think it's right for you to come in and be like, you're doing Twilight lore wrong. Like,
Absolutely
no, that's how they want to do their role play. If you don't like it, here's the door. There are other
Make
role
your
plays out
own.
there. Exactly. Make your own. Join a different one. So, when it comes to role play in particular, I do think that you have to kind of like when you're joining a group role play, a group supernatural role play, you do have to kind of like temper that a little bit if you want to join the group, or just decide to not join the group.
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of getting at. I used Twilight as an example because it made so many people mad and so many people to be like, "Oh, this is the wrong way to do it." But I want you to know that if you are writing as an individual character and you're not looking to join a group, you don't get to have you get to make up your own rules. You get to make up your own lore. That's between you and your partner, right? There is no right or wrong way to do any of this.
Mm-hmm.
If you are going to join a group, then you have to respect the lore that has been built.
Yep.
If you don't like it, leave. Like Karen said, if you don't like it, get out or respect it.
There's just so many role plays out there. There's so many role plays out there that I can't imagine spending energy on trying to get somebody to change their role play to suit me when I could just go make one or I could join a different one.
Or or you could just play within the rules.
You might like it if you try it. You don't know.
You might like it, or you might like sit there and be like, "Hey, I've been a part of this RP for a little while, and I think that this could be developed a little bit. What do you think about this idea?" Which has happened to us, by the way.
Yeah,
Then we're like, "Oh, this idea is great. Absolutely,
yeah.
It's now part of the lore." Like,
yep. People have come in with like way better ideas than what we had, and all it really took was just them taking maybe a couple of weeks to get comfortable with us and then propose it, and then there it goes into the role play, Yes. But I do think you have to build up that trust a little bit. I think when we do have people come in that are instantly like picking apart the lore, that's like a super turn off. Like if that's my first impression of you, then like I'm like, oh my god, like you sound like work. I don't want to be your friend.
The only thing that I can think of, like, as far as like advice for creating your own lore and everything like that, is be consistent.
Yeah.
Right. When you are building your character and you're building your lore for that character, just be consistent with the rules.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what I got for you.
Yeah, don't try to bend the rules for yourself just because you can if it's your game.
Yeah, or don't like
Rules
be
for
like,
myself.
"Oh, werewolves change on the full moon, but except for this full moon because I don't want them to change this full moon." It's like, no, you got to be consistent.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
Yep.
But that's really what I got for Supernatural.
Okay. And we don't have time. We don't really have more time to go into that. But we have a whole other episode of our opinions on building supernatural role plays. It was like episode 3 or something. It was one of the really early ones. So you guys can find.
It was the first one.
Yeah, it was the first one. It was the first one that I had you on. So actually, then it was episode. Yeah, it was the first.
Episode 3, but it was actually our first episode.
You're right. It was our first real episode because the first 2 episodes we didn't know what the hell we wanted to do yet. So yeah, you can go check that out for like more opinions on supernatural role plays and how to build them properly.
Yeah. Should we move into? Do we want to have before we do this? Thumper, any final thoughts, wrap-ups about anything that we talked about?
Don't afraid to be bold, and because if you write exactly who you are, you're not gonna get the the true joy out of role playing. The joy of role playing is getting to be what you aren't. So please be adventurous, go out there and try something weird. It might not work, but it might. And even if you try something out and it doesn't quite work, you still have that experience, and that still helps you as a writer and you as a person. So be bold, don't be afraid to go out there and try something new, something weird. Be a person who's afraid of broccoli and has a weird twitch that makes people think that they're kind of crazy. Do it. It's fun.
I love that. That's perfect. Like I couldn't add anything better. Yes, absolutely 100%.
Karen?
That's it. No, that was perfect. That was
Okay.
perfect.
And my very, very quick thing is a person cannot be boiled down to one singular thing, such as their race, mental illness, or trauma, and therefore a character should not be either. Make something else.
Yep.
That's all I got.
Make sure they have a hobby or something, right? Something.
Yeah, or something. Okay, so I have shared the good news of the week in the chat.
Okay, I'm gonna save the game and get that open. See, save and quit. Yes. Okay.
I'm very excited for this good news.
It's
Oh
cute,
my
good.
God, the title of the article. Okay, let me get this opened up and drag over onto the other screen.
I already love this a lot.
Right? There's just something.
Oh,
just,
it's
like,
very good.
Okay.
It's so
It's a
small.
good deed.
Y'all are like building it up, and my computer's like it's taking its sweet time closing the
It's
game.
taking
Okay,
its time,
there we go.
but 100% it is worth the like. Just scroll down to the first picture.
Oh
Yeah.
my God. Okay, let me get so you can see the whole thing. There we go.
Scroll
Oh
down to the
my
first
God.
picture. It is worth it.
What?
Yes. So this father decided to. He's a cycler, and apparently he had a huge cycle planned for 1,250 miles from Russia to Lincolnshire. But due to the pandemic, he wasn't able to do it because he couldn't cross countries without positive tests or negative tests.
He was forced to
So he
backpedal.
decided to then cycle from Glasgow to Manchester, using his daughter's bike that they learned to ride on as a laugh, quote unquote. Apparently, it was a very long cycle. One of the days was up to 6 hours. He bursted like 8 tires, but he managed to drag the 12-inch wheels to his home near Manchester on September 21st.
Oh wow. Look at this. This picture of him with his girls is so cute.
Right? He like even climbed over peaks, summited some places. The bike he quotes was definitely not built for it. But
Clearly not.
clearly not.
How much?
But he did it. And it was for charity. So he ended up raising almost 8,300 pounds, or yeah, 8,300 pounds, which is around almost $11,000. And he's gonna hope to do the Russia to Manchester one next spring.
Hope he gets a reinforced bike for that, because I don't know if he's going to be able to access those tires.
I have a feeling that he will do his real bike. But can you imagine just being like, you know what? I'm gonna joke and say that I'm gonna do this and then actually do it.
I admire the commitment.
Yeah, I'm sure by the time he was like climbing up one of those hills, like he said it was a 1,300-foot like peak, and he was like, you gotta, if it's going uphill, it's gonna come downhill at some point. And I would just be like, I regret everything.
I just can't. I haven't ridden a bike in like so long, and probably like 10 years or so. And even if I was going to like riding a bike itself is kind of like hard enough, right? And and trying to do it on a bike that is way too small for you, I just can't imagine. Like,
Laura
yeah,
just
Laura's
said
saying
the
is,
same exact thing. Yeah.
yeah, like I would fall down. Like I would fall down instantly and repeatedly. I just can't like he must be a really good cyclist. Like he must be a really, really good cyclist to get that far on like a little kid's bike.
Yeah. I can you imagine? Like, I'm sure that this was harder than doing the whole like 12,000 miles,
I
or not
bet.
12,000, 1,200 miles. Um, that doing the 200-mile trek on this small bike was probably harder than the one from Russia.
So yeah, their center of gravity is like, yeah, it ends up, yeah, I think you're right. It would end up being like 6 inches off the ground. Like that would be hard as hell. Like I
Yeah.
can't imagine.
Nope.
My knees hurt just looking at him.
Right?
Right.
I'm just like, I'm too old to even think about doing that. My poor knees.
I mean, I
He's
couldn't, I
like
don't,
10 years older than me.
like I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it on a bike that was my size, let alone like a bike like this. So this is amazing. Like
So,
amazing human feat right here.
yep. So I figured that that would be some good news for this Saturday afternoon.
I love it. I love it. I have some other
Very
good
good news.
news.
Oh,
While we were on stream, my camera that I ordered like a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago now, finally arrived. So this is the last potato camera stream that we will
I
have.
am clapping. That's amazing.
So next time y'all see me, it will be in 1080p and you'll actually be able to like see me. I won't just look like a bunch of blobs on the screen. So yes, I'm very, very excited about that. I got the text. I got the text like while we were talking that it's
Ah,
here. So
that's amazing.
yes.
All right. Well, shall we sign out then?
Yes. Okay. So
Thumper, remind the people where we can find you.
yes.
Oh,
Sorry,
you
Karen.
can.
No, you're good.
It was lovely to chat with you all. You can find me on Discord at Thumper #7201. I promise I don't bite unless you ask me to. And you can find me on Tumblr at Dedicated Death, where you put the word dead in there for dedicated.
Love it. Love it. And Landon, where can we
Um,
find you?
you can find me on Land in Maine on Instagram, and that's really the most exciting place to find me. There's lots of witchy and autumn content happening right now on there because I'm in a whole ass mood at the moment. So,
I
You
love
can
it.
also find me on Steam as Angelic Thumper. I forgot
Oh.
about that. We were talking about games, so I thought,
Oh
why not
yeah.
throw that one in there?
Yeah, might as well. Absolutely. Do you play Among Us on Steam or are you playing it on your phone?
Steam.
Steam. Okay. I need to get the Steam version. I need to get the Steam version of
It's
it.
like $5 on Steam,
Yeah,
but
it's
I
not
like the bigger
expensive.
screen.
Yeah, it's not expensive. Might as well, right, to support the developer at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and you can find me right here, of course, on Twitch. So if you liked the stream today, please make sure you scroll down just a little bit below here and click that little heart to give us a follow. That way you get notified every time we go live. We have this show, which is Interstage Window, where I chat with some of my friends, usually Landon and sometimes Naomi, and sometimes also a guest like Thumper. And we talk about, you know, all kinds of topics that are related to role playing and writing and just existing as creatives online, really. So that's this stream on Saturdays from around noon to 2ish. And then because Twitch really wants you to stream more than once a week, I started a second stream, which is called Artistic License, which is on Thursday evenings, which starts at around 6:30ish. It starts whenever I'm done with dinner, which is around 6:30 normally, but sometimes it's a little late. And that is on Thursdays, and it's no specific topic or objective. It's just whatever I feel like streaming that particular evening. But because I'm a dork, it's still like how tos and stuff like that. I might stream some games. Maybe I'll stream some Among Us. Maybe I'll stream some Final Fantasy this next week. We'll see. I haven't decided yet. So if you want to catch that, that's on Thursdays. And then on YouTube, of course, you can watch Spare Room, which is my roleplay help show that is every Wednesday at 2 p.m., which is kind of like a shorter version of a lot of my roleplay advice. It's a lot more concise, of course, than the conversation that we have here. So a little bit of a different format, although we have some similar topics on there than what we have on this stream. So that's all the places you can find me. Also, join my Discord if you're interested in potentially coming on stream like Thumper did today. So, and Eric, he's been on the stream before, and I know he mentioned today he'd be interested in doing another future one. Lunar, we would love to have you, love to set you up, so make sure you're in the Discord. And the other place that I actually post content is Twitter. So you can find my Twitter, which is It's Karen Terry, if you want to see my occasional hot takes and me advertising and chilling all the time. That's mostly what I do on Twitter. And that's all the places you can find me. And all the links for that are all down below.
Awesome. Well, don't forget to be awesome, guys.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And don't forget to make it a great day. And Thumper, thanks again so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of course. All right.
Bye.
Bye, guys.